Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Tuesday evening to you all. Hope you guys are faring well out there and have had yourselves a great Tuesday and a great start to your work week. I got you a pretty detailed update tonight on Nicole. It is now Tropical Storm Nicole. It was Subtropical Storm Nicole, but it's now developed tropical characteristics, so we can actually call it a tropical storm. I will tell you in the very beginning of this video that some of this data could be old. This could be a hurricane by the time some of you folks watch this. Nicole is strengthening at a pretty decent pace. Definitely not rapid intensification or anything like that. We're certainly not going to see that. But it is verifying right now as far as a millibar, as far as how deep the storm is, lower than what models are initiating at, meaning it's stronger than what models are thinking it's at right now. So I want to go on and throw that important information out there in the very beginning. This is starting to look like it's going to be a pretty impactful event for areas of eastern Florida. It actually is starting to look like it's going to make landfall as the first hurricane to hit the eastern shorelines of Florida since 2005 Hurricane Katrina. Now, I know you're thinking, well, Katrina hit New Orleans, right? Well, if you remember, if you can go back and remember, Katrina actually made landfall, I believe, as a Category 1 hurricane in the far southern tip of Florida before it eventually got into the Gulf of Mexico, strengthened into a major hurricane. But that was the last time, 17 years ago. So it's really hard to believe. So you would think that the eastern side of Florida would get hit a lot, but really they don't. Nothing compared to the western side of Florida and the Panhandle. But we're going to give you all the latest and greatest information. If you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. Guys, hit me up on Twitter and Facebook. I'm telling you, it's a great way to follow along. I obviously can't make an update video-wise every hour, so it's a great way to get up-to-date information. If you guys got anything that I can pray about or pray over, please put it in the comments below. It gives me an opportunity to pray over it, and it gives others an opportunity to do so too. If I cough at any point during the video, I do apologize. I'm still trying to shake a really dry cough from being sick a couple weeks ago. It gets a little better each day, but it certainly is still there. And now my little girl, my youngest little girl, is starting to get a little bit sick. So it's just been some sick times for me and my family, but we're strong. We'll make it through. So definitely appreciate any kind of prayers for my little girls. I really do appreciate that. But here we go, Nicole. It is right now technically a 990 millibar low pressure, but Recon, the hurricane hunters, have went into this and found pressure as low as 986 millibars. So this thing is strengthening. It really is. If you look at the latest update, now I will tell you, it is 6:26 at this point of me making this video now. There will be a 7 p.m. update Eastern time here shortly, within 30 minutes. So there's a chance. It's a 65 mile per hour storm right now. There's a chance it could be a 70 mile per hour tropical storm, or they might upgrade it to a hurricane. I doubt they'll upgrade it to a hurricane on the next update, but I certainly won't be surprised if they update it to a 70 mile per hour tropical storm. But it doesn't make a huge amount of difference as far as information being fed to you guys with this video. But one thing you notice is the wind field is very large, but the most intense winds are starting to shrink, which you would think, hey, that's good news. But really, that's starting to happen because Nicole is starting to develop inner core, which means it's becoming more tropical, which means there's likely going to be some kind of eye wall that moves in probably just south of Melbourne, Florida, and then really hit those beaches south of those areas pretty hard. So it's still forecast to become a hurricane as early as sometime tomorrow, and then make landfall as a hurricane. And you got all these watches and warnings. We're going to get a closer look at that here in a second. So stay with me. So one thing I did not pull up, and I'm just remembering this, is storm surge. In fact, we can do it on the fly here. Here we go. Let's look right into here. Storm surge right here. The peak storm surge as of right now, 3 to 5 feet is possible, all the way from North Palm Beach all the way up into about halfway up the coastline of Georgia. 2 to 4 feet of storm surge possible, almost all the way up to Charleston. And then you're going to have some potential for some storm surge into the Big Bend areas of Florida. So, there's a good chance this is going to get back out over the northeast Gulf of Mexico. Is it going to re-strengthen? I don't think it's going to have enough time. I think there's going to be enough dry air around. but I don't think it's going to. I think there's a possibility that you folks a little bit further west in the Panhandle of Florida are going to have more impactful weather than maybe what we thought a couple days ago. And we'll talk about that here in the video. This is what I love to look at, guys. Zoom Earth. I feel like it's a site that's underutilized, but forecast to be a 70-mile-per-hour storm on the next update or two. Forecast to become a hurricane and slam the northern Bahamas, Freeport, places like this pretty hard sometime probably tomorrow afternoon. The worst conditions expected here with these hurricane warnings in effect. And then it's going to make a landfall somewhere between West Palm Beach and Melbourne. Somewhere in this area, it's going to make an official landfall. So I really think the northern part, just north of the center, is going to be the most intense part as far as winds. But it's just, we got to figure this out, because with this starting to develop tropical characteristics, there's, like I said, there's going to be a very small isolated area, just like with any hurricane, or where the eye wall, the eye center of the storm moves in, that's going to have damaging winds, destructive, maybe life-threatening winds for these areas. 70, 80, maybe as much as 90-mile-per-hour winds. And this continues, maintains tropical storm conditions through Thursday afternoon. I can tell you the timeline has sped up a little bit. This has it, riding through Georgia as early as the wee hours of the morning Friday. And by the time we're at 1 p.m. Friday, it's already poured rain in these areas. The center of the storm, maybe in the upstate of South Carolina. And then this is now expected to stay inland, as opposed to making an abrupt turn out to sea like we thought it was maybe going to do a couple of days ago. So as far as watches and warnings, this kind of brighter red right here, these are hurricane warnings. This darker red right here, these are tropical storm warnings. Now, I don't know the name of every single county in Florida, but if you see your county here, I'm sure you get alerts on your phone. It's very important to know what kind of watches, warnings are in effect. But one thing you notice is you got tropical storm watches up even for Tampa Bay and to the Big Bend areas. I would not be surprised one bit if tropical storm watches and warnings get extended probably a little bit further west into the Panhandle of Florida, into southern sections of Georgia, as some of the models like the idea of this really getting west and then abruptly turning northeast and staying inland. But you got tropical storm watches up for these counties, even a few counties inland into Georgia, South Carolina. There's going to be some big-time coastal flooding issues all the way up, through the coastal regions of North Carolina, with an intense onshore flow bringing 30 to as much as 50-mile-per-hour winds from the east in general. And this is going to bring some coastal flooding to these regions, some significant storm surge for these regions. So if we look at the storm right now, this is water vapor loop. It shows that, hey, there's still a little bit of dry air in the southern end of the storm. The northern end of the half of the storm is pretty much completely protected. There's a nice outflow. It's got a lot of moisture that's really wrapping around the northern part of the storm. But the southern part of the storm is also beginning to get protected. So that's why it's regained tropical characteristics. And it's actually looks like it's kind of jolting west, southwest now, before it's going to probably just get back turning west and then eventually turn northwest and make landfall somewhere into here. But, you look at this and you still think, well, this still doesn't look like a very healthy storm. But I really think this will look much better by tomorrow morning. And that's not good news. That's not at all. And I really think this could be a hurricane by the time most of us wake up. Like I said, this could be a hurricane. When I get to the end of the video, I'll go back to the National Hurricane Center site and I'll see if it's upgraded. Hopefully it has, so I can give you guys some updated information. Hurricane Hunter's flying through the storm right now. They just made a second pass. But one thing you notice, the wind field is not as broad. You got gusty winds well away from the center being right here. But the most intense winds are now really consolidated to the center of this storm, which means it's becoming a more tropical in nature system, which you typically have. Just like with a category 2, 3, 4, 5 hurricane, the closer you get to the center, the more the winds pick up, right? Well, a lot of times with a subtropical system, you could have some pretty gusty winds well away from the center. In the middle of the system might not be that breezy. I chased Hurricane Ian on the South Carolina coastline, not in Florida, but I chased it, and I was right in the middle of where the center came on shore, guys, and it looked like it was about 15 to 25 mile per hour gust. And I think it made landfall as an 80 mile per hour hurricane. So it just tells you when these kind of have these subtropical characteristics, they're definitely everywhere. But this is starting to develop more of a core. So 986 millibar low pressure from the hurricane hunters. So it's certainly deeper than what I'm about to show you, which is what the models are initiating at. GFS initiating at a 991 millibar low pressure tropical storm. Has it deepening, hitting, going over the northern Bahamas, and really somewhat intensifying kind of quickly as it makes a landfall. But as it making landfalls around a 984, 985 millibar low pressure storm. But you got to think, right now it's a 986 millibar low pressure. So I'm actually buying the H-Wharf model, which I'm about to show you, which makes it all the way to a sub 980 millibar low pressure, which indicates a stronger system. But this would make landfall, like I said, like we've been thinking the whole entire time, overnight, Wednesday night into Thursday morning, rides the Florida Peninsula. The latest GFS has it definitely more south. In fact, would certainly have it south of the National Hurricane Center track. Would make landfall certainly probably a lot closer to, I would say, West Palm Beach. Certainly has it much more south. And then it really trails the storm just in general more south. Gets it clear out into the Gulf of Mexico. Makes an additional landfall as a 984 millibar low pressure. I mean, look at the GFS. Look how far west it is on this run. It almost gets the center of the storm all the way into Alabama. Then makes an abrupt turn north and then northeast. Rides over Georgia, the Carolinas, and basically up the spine of the Appalachian Mountains as we go through Thursday, Friday, into Saturday morning. And this moves up the coast. We'll get a little bit closer look at you folks in the Northeast also. The European, same kind of deal timing-wise. Has it making landfalls at 988 millibar low pressure. But guys, I mean, it's already a 986. So it's hard to take the GFS and the European very serious. And a lot of times, the model I'm about to show you, the H-Wharf model, a lot of times it's kind of dissed on because a lot of times it shows a worst case scenario every time. But honestly, it hits a lot more than what people realize. European definitely takes more of a National Hurricane Center track and rides well north of Tampa Bay, maybe gets it out over the Gulf of Mexico briefly, makes a secondary landfall somewhere in the northern Big Bend areas, rides it over central Georgia, takes it over the upstate of South Carolina, and then really takes that track, at least in the short term, that favors the National Hurricane Center track. Now we look at the H-Wharf model. It's even verifying weaker than what it actually is, a 989 millibar low pressure. But I like the idea of it strengthening pretty good as it rides over the northern Bahamas. It's already a sub 980 millibar low pressure. Freeport would get slammed pretty good with this as the center of the storm would move right over you guys in the northern two islands of the Bahamas. But what you notice here is this makes landfall as around a 975 millibar low pressure, 974. So this is around 1 o'clock in the morning tomorrow night into Thursday morning. Look at this intense core. I mean, this is a true tropical system. This is an eye wall, and this would likely be, if the millibar is right, this would likely make landfall as an 85, an 80 to 90 mile per hour hurricane. I don't know if it's going to make it to a category 2, but guys, I really think that it could make landfall stronger than a 75 mile per hour storm. I'm not trying to hype anything up. It's just my own personal opinion. But this is a pretty massive center. This brings a lot of nasty weather. Thrashes Orlando with, probably 50, 60 mile per hour winds sustained. This would move it north of Tampa Bay. So it takes more of a track with the Euro. And like I said, makes a secondary landfall somewhere in the panhandle of Florida. and, could bring some pretty intense weather for you folks. Tropical storm force conditions. That's why I think the tropical storm warnings and watches could get extended west, especially if this trend continues overnight. And then we keep this going and brings the rest of the core of this system into Georgia. This would bring a lot of rain to Atlanta Friday, just in general, and potential for some significant rainfall for the southern Appalachian Mountains. It really could. It could bring a lot of rainfall for eastern Tennessee too. But the further this works west, the less rain that areas to the east is going to see. And in fact, there could be a severe weather situation that develops if this continues to track a little bit further west. Get my directionals mixed up. Where, in that northeast to east quadrant, you can have some severe weather with a tornado threat. Certainly something we need to watch. In fact, there's a marginal risk for areas of Georgia and the Carolinas for that already. So we certainly need to watch to see if that gets upgraded to a slight risk. The latest H-Wolf model as far as wind speeds, like I said, this is in knots. So, but you see these darker colors right here. I know it's probably kind of small on your screen. That's 65 to 70 knot winds moving on shore, which is equivalent to probably 75, 80 mile per hour winds moving on shore, sustained in certain areas. And then this brings some strong winds, throughout the central areas of the peninsula of Florida. And then, like I said, it gets back over the Gulf of Mexico, maybe redevelops this core temporarily, and brings some pretty intense winds into areas of the panhandle of Florida before eventually bringing some pretty gusty winds through Georgia, late Thursday night into Friday morning and Friday afternoon. And then that's as far out as the run goes right now. But, one thing you'll watch here is how it regains these tropical characteristics. This is a lot of dry air up here. This is a lot of moist air with Nicole. Nicole becomes more symmetrical. There's a little bit of dry air on the south side, but in general, it's completely protected its core by a pretty intact moisture bubble. Not a lot of dry air, keeping it from losing its tropical characteristics. I mean, it looks very healthy by the time you get into Thursday afternoon and it reemerges back over the Gulf of Mexico. Massive moisture bubble. And then eventually, though, the dry air trails behind it, and then it goes probably subtropical again back over the southeast. But, the rest of the mid-Atlantic, the northeast, guys, you guys are going to start seeing rain as early as Friday morning into Washington, D.C., West Virginia, Delmarva area. As we're getting into Friday afternoon and evening, just Friday is just going to be a soggy day across the eastern U.S. It's going to be gusty winds. This is going to move all the way through Maine. That moves through. And then what's interesting is the cold air filters in behind it. And then you get a secondary low that pops up off the coast of North Carolina based off the GFS. And it almost wants to throw a little bit of snow for areas of the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia and West Virginia. It's just something we need to watch. It'd be very interesting. And then brings just an all-out snow event for New Hampshire, Vermont, and areas of Maine. So it'd be wild to see a tropical system or subtropical system move through and then turn around and get snow a couple of days later. It is November. As far as wind gusts, what could they look like? This moves on shore. The GFS has a pretty intense core here, moves on shore, brings 65, 70, 80 mile per hour wind gust potential. The GFS wants it just south of Melbourne, hits all them beaches pretty hard just south of Melbourne. And then this reemerges back over the Gulf of Mexico, might bring a period of 40, 50, 60 mile per hour winds across the panhandle of Florida, and then gets into Georgia, brings some gusty winds across the Carolinas, especially the eastern Carolinas. And then there could be a period of some pretty intense winds early Saturday morning into just maybe Saturday afternoon for areas of the I-95 corridor into southern New England. As far as rainfall, this is going to be such a quick moving system. It's going to have a lot of rain with it, but it's not going to be stalling out or anything. So I don't think we're going to have anywhere that's going to see 6, 7, 8, 12 inches of rain. I think the most rain you're going to see is maybe you might see areas that might get as much as 6 inches of rain. That'll probably be somewhere in Florida. but just widespread 2 to 4 inches of rain through areas of Georgia, the Carolinas, maybe even areas of eastern Kentucky and Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia. I mean, areas of southeast Ohio could see a lot of rain. I know a guy that comments in the comments a lot about his area in Ohio. Hopefully you can get some rain off Nicole. Pennsylvania and just all the Northeast picks up a lot of rain from this. But this is actually ticked a little bit further west just in general. This is the Weather Prediction Center, so these are the professionals. So that's pretty much it on this. We'll give you an update on the rest of it tomorrow, and we'll continue to keep you guys updated. Tomorrow will be a big day as this system will be coming onshore tomorrow night into Thursday morning. So one thing we watch is here comes the pattern-changing cold front. This moves through. I just mentioned that snow. Lake effect snow machine kick starts late this weekend into early next week. And then the southern branch gets active due to just troughing. So you got a low pressure into the Gulf of Mexico. This isn't a tropical low pressure. This is a nice track for some nice tracks for some winter storms. This one particular storm keeps showing up sometime around the 17th through the 20th time frame. Wants to bring snow to Texas potentially. Maybe a little bit of snow for Kentucky, West Virginia. Guys, this isn't a forecast, but I can tell you it's something that keeps showing up. So we'll continue to watch this, especially after we get Nicole on out of the way. But one thing we're certainly looking at is this pattern-changing cold front that moves through. And here it is. You see these digging trough here. And this will be the first push of cold air this weekend. It'll keep us nice and chilly through most of next week. And then one thing we watch for is a tall ridge building up to Alaska. This opens up the doors to our north for the Arctic. So this allows for a big push of Arctic air potentially to move somewhere, to dump somewhere into the U.S. We just don't know where yet. Is it going to be in the central U.S.? Is it going to be in the eastern U.S.? I can tell you that this run has actually trended more west, which would bring less cold for the eastern U.S. But this is pretty far out, so we need to try to figure this out. But this is a pretty intense cold air dump for a lot of the country about 10 days from now. And it's certainly something we need to watch. And, you look at the operational GFS. Here comes that big cold front this weekend. Saturday might be the last nice warmish day for the extreme southeast. And then we get into Sunday, and it just gets downright chilly. Widespread below freezing temperatures. If you haven't gotten below freezing yet, I know my house actually technically has not hit sub 32 degrees yet. A lot of people are going to see their first sub 32 degree readings, and the cold air continues. And then we watch for that big cold air dump somewhere around day 10. This could bring some pretty intense cold air, but we'll try to figure that out and focus in a lot more on that after we're done with Nicole. But Nicole's obviously going to be our primary focus. That's all I got for tonight, guys. Thank y'all for tuning in. God bless all y'all, and have yourselves a great night.